One transistor in the billion transistor chip might make the other
something very strong with a lot of strength.
We all know how people talk.
In a way, the start is to sandblast.
Very
Words let people express their thoughts and feelings. They might tell stories or share information. So when people talk, we listen. But did you know that we can also communicate in a language that doesn't involve any words at all? Music is a language too. After all, language is another way for people to communicate with each other. Music also communicates by telling stories, expressing emotions, and making us think, but without words. Don't believe me? Well, think about this. Have you ever heard music tell a joke? And if music can tell a joke, you know it can claim victory after a hard-fought fight. Without any words, music tells stories full of action, adventure, or romance. Sometimes, a particular rhythm or a certain pattern of notes can transport us to a faraway place or to a completely different culture. Music can touch our emotions too, by making us feel happy or sad or any of the emotions in between. Music can express our anger or frustration, and there's nothing better than music to capture pure, simple joy. There's something else that music can do. It can make us think about any number of things, like the beauty of nature, a favorite memory, or how great it feels to be alive. Music speaks to our hearts and to our minds. A composer can make us see things, feel things, and even understand things without saying a single word. In these listening activities, we'll consider the ways composers work with music as a language, and how they manage to communicate thoughts, stories, and emotions through music. If music is a language, who is talking? A composer writes or composes a work of music. Composers of orchestral music write for a full orchestra, which is a group of nearly 100 musicians playing all sorts of instruments. Each instrument has its own voice, with its own distinct sound, and each instrument might be playing different notes. The composer blends all those unique sounds and voices together to make a beautiful and amazing statement or conversation, because music is a language, right? A composer has to choose the right instrument to voice his music. But what instrument to choose? The orchestra is divided into 4 sections, or families, of instruments, each one with its own personality. The brass section includes horns, trumpets, trombones, and tuba. Horns and other brass instruments have a bright sound associated with courage. They are often used in the loud, exciting parts of the music to create dramatic swells and sudden bursts of sound. See if you can tell which of the brass instruments are playing in this excerpt. You probably heard the trumpets, but if you listen very carefully, you can also hear French horns, trombones, and a tuba. The string section is made up of violins, violas, cellos, and basses. The sound of the string section can be soft and sweet, or soaring and majestic. See if you can tell which string instruments are playing in this excerpt. The violins are out in front, but you might also hear the violas, cellos, and string basses. The woodwind section contains the flute, oboe, clarinet, and bassoon. The sound of the woodwind instruments has been compared to the human singing voice, and they can carry the melody over the quietest and the loudest parts of a piece. Try to name the woodwind instruments you hear in this excerpt. Flutes, clarinets, oboes, and bassoons, they're all there. The percussion section is home to drums, chimes, gongs, cymbals, and whistles. These instruments are used to provide pounding rhythms, booming drum rolls, and driving energy. This one should be easy, but listen for the difference between the drums. This one's a little tricky because the composer was working with timpani, bongo drums, conga drums, trap drums, and cowbells. The percussion family even includes xylophones, chimes, and maracas. Now that you know the 4 different sections of the orchestra, let's take the time to create a set of 4 flashcards. 1 with a tuba for the brass section, 1 with a violin for the string section, 1 with a bassoon for the woodwinds, and 1 with a kettle drum for the percussion. Place the 4 flashcards on your desk. We'll listen to the finale from Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 4. And when you hear a section playing, point to it with your finger. Listen carefully, because it could be that more than one section is playing at the same time. In fact, you might hear all 4 sections. Here we go. You probably heard the brass section, and then the string section. Did you hear the cymbals come in? The percussion section is in there too. Let's listen again and go a little further now that you have the hang of it. This time though, when you hear a section of the orchestra playing, pick up the flashcard and hold it in the air. You might notice whether other classmates are holding the same cards in the air at the same time. Watch out though, because there's a lot going on and it starts to get fast. Let's give it a try. How did you do? Were you able to listen for the different sections in the orchestra? You might have noticed that you preferred one section over another. If you could play in an orchestra, which section would you prefer? Which instrument in that section would you want to play? You might have also noticed that composers sometimes have sections of the orchestra almost talking to each other, passing a melody between them, or responding back and forth. If you missed it, let's go back and listen to that excerpt one more time, just to hear the conversation between the different sections. Did you hear it? Sometimes when we listen to music, we hear instruments talking to each other. That interaction is another way we can appreciate music as a language. The instrument you're hearing is the violin. It was invented in Italy almost 500 years ago, and in all those years, it hasn't changed. The violin became popular quickly and remains popular today because of its ability to sing, a lot like the human voice. The violin is made of wood and is only 23 inches long, which makes it rather small, but the violin is very powerful. It has 4 strings which stretch from one end of the instrument to the other, across a small bridge. The vibration of the strings creates the sound, and by varying the length of the strings with finger pressure, a violinist can reach a very large range of high notes and low notes. The sound resonates from the hollow wooden chamber inside the violin, which creates a very loud and strong, but warm sound. To play the violin, a violinist tucks the instrument under their chin and either draws a wooden bow, strung with horse's hair, across the strings, or plucks the strings with the fingers, a technique that is called pizzicato. Russian composer Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky famously used the pizzicato technique for the string section throughout the scherzo movement of his Fourth Symphony. The violin is a very important instrument in the orchestra. In fact, there are more violins in an orchestra than any other instrument, sometimes as many as 30. But the violin can also be featured, not as a member of the orchestra, but as a solo separate guest artist performing with the orchestra. How does that happen? Just as audiences are attracted to the violin's ability to sing, composers are too. Composers like to show off their ability to write for the violin, and also to show off what the violin can really do. When composers feature an instrument like the violin, they sometimes compose a special work called a concerto. A concerto will feature a particular instrument, in concert, with the full orchestra. Typically, a concerto is very challenging and requires an especially gifted musician to perform it. One example is Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto. Listen again to the conversation happening between the violin soloist and the full orchestra. In these works, the violinist delivers something like an Olympic performance, reaching for perfection despite an extremely high degree of difficulty in terms of the speed and accuracy. Remember, the violin is a small instrument with only 4 strings. The violinist only has 5 fingers and a bow. Playing this concerto requires a great deal of skill on the part of the performer. Listen to this particular passage and pay attention to the violinist's speed and accuracy. Did you hear that? Wow! No mess-ups! Amazing speed! Perfect form! I'd give that a 10. At the same time, the musician is called upon to play the music with a personal interpretation, or how the violinist speaks to the audience, in addition to technical difficulty. Let's listen again, and this time, listen beyond the violinist's speed and accuracy. Listen for the musician's ability to make the violin sing, like a human voice, to sing in a way that speaks to us. Apart from the musician's technical ability, did you hear the violin speaking to you? Did you feel any emotions while you were listening to the music? Did your imagination paint a picture? Or were you reminded of memories or of other thoughts? When we listen to the music, we admire the musician's ability to play their instrument. But we also listen for the violin's ability to speak to us individually. In fact, each person may hear something different when they listen to the violin, or any music. Music draws on each person's thoughts and emotions, so that the listening experience becomes very personal, between the musician and the person hearing it, one to one. That personal relationship is another way in which music works as language. If music is a language, it can certainly tell a good story. Are you hearing a story right now? I am. I don't know all the details, but it's something full of adventure and bravery. Do you imagine castles or battlefields? Maybe mountains in the distance, or a dense forest. We need a good hero for this story. A prince or a princess. Old kings and kindly wizards. Maybe a magic spell. And we need villains. An evil sorcerer. Monsters would be good. Maybe even a dragon. If you're hearing any of those things, then the music is doing exactly what Russian composer Mikhail Glinka had hoped it would. Glinka wrote this music for a Russian opera titled Ruslan and Lyudmila, based on an epic poem by a Russian poet named Alexander Pushkin. The poem gathers together many Russian folk tales to tell the story of Lyudmila, a beautiful princess who's about to marry her true love, the noble Ruslan. Unfortunately, their wedding is interrupted by monsters who grab Lyudmila and steal her away. I hate it when that happens. Of course, it's up to Ruslan to rescue his bride. And he certainly will, but not before lots of battles, magic gardens, sleeping spells, a magic ring, and more monsters. Oh, and a dragon. This is the music that Glinka wrote to set the scene. Notice he gave the music lots of sweeping romance and adventure to put the audience in the right mood. We'll listen to this music again, but before we do, imagine that you've been hired to design the set or the costumes. You get to choose. For a huge production of Ruslan and Lyudmila. And the producers are thinking big. You can design anything you want. Be thinking in terms of the stage setting, where the action happens, or the stage costumes, what the characters will wear. For this exercise, have a piece of paper and a marker or pencil ready so you can draw your ideas. Once you're ready, we'll listen to the music again. But don't start drawing yet. Just listen. Decide whether you want to be the set designer or the costume designer, and listen to Glinka's music as I ask a few questions. Remember, you don't need to draw yet. Just listen and think. Go ahead and jot down your thoughts if it helps to remember them later. This is the musical world that Glinka created for Ruslan and Ludmila. If you're the set designer, you'll be thinking about the setting for the wedding when the monsters crash the party. Ask yourself, is it nighttime or daytime? Are we inside a castle? In the castle's courtyard? Maybe the wedding is not in the castle at all. Maybe it's in a cathedral or somewhere in the forest. What might the setting look like when it's decorated for the wedding, before the monsters appear? What might it look like after? If you're the costume designer, choose a specific character. Is it Ruslan, the noble bridegroom? Or is it Ludmila, the stolen princess? Or is it the scary monster? Okay, look over your answers. And get your drawing paper ready to sketch out your ideas. You'll hear the music again, and this time, as you draw, allow the music to influence your choices. As you start drawing, consider these questions. Is it daytime or nighttime? Do the skies change when the monsters arrive? Is Ruslan dressed to fight a dragon? Is Ludmila dressed to get married? Or for her escape? Are the characters dancing? Or are they on horseback? Take the time to share your drawings with your classmates. Did you make certain design choices based on your imagination? Or did they come from the music itself? If you were listening to the music and letting the music speak to you, that's another way that music works, as a language. Music tells us stories and expresses emotions. Music can also make us think. French composer Jules Massenet's opera Thais is about a young woman who faces many challenges. At one point in the story, she stands on stage alone, trying to decide what to do with her life. Massenet wrote a piece of music called Meditation to play underneath that scene. Meditation means to focus your thoughts, to contemplate, or to reflect. In a way, Massenet was trying to compose music that would seem like silence, or maybe music that would encourage listeners to be silent and to think. Let's listen and think about silence. something about the music does suggest being alone. Even when you listen to this music in a room full of other people, the music speaks directly, one-to-one, on a very personal level. Almost as though we are alone with the music. There are many ways of listening. On any day, we listen to family, friends, teachers, television, movies, the radio, computers, iPhones, and video games. Some listening is active, when we really want to hear what is happening or being said. Other listening is passive, when we take in sounds that we didn't intend to hear. How do you listen to your mom or dad, or the grown-up in charge, when they tell you to do something you don't want to do? How do you listen when a friend is telling a secret? Or when you hear a fire alarm, or a fight down the hall? Can you listen to a television show, play a video game, and have a conversation at the same time? Pull out a piece of paper and write down a few of these words. We'll start with listen. Then let's add other words for listen. They can mean the same thing, or they can describe different ways of listening. Listen to the following words and see if there are any that you want to add to your list. If there are, write them down. Heed, eavesdrop, snoop, pay attention, take note, clue in, ignore, overhear, go away, blah, blah, blah. I heard a little of that. Quiet down, this is really important. Nothing but noise. That's really beautiful. Let's listen to Massenet again. This time, look over your words and keep track of how you are listening. Point to the word on your paper that describes how you are listening. You might start with one word and move to another, or to 3 or 4 more. Just see what happens. Did you notice anything about the way you listen? Did you start with one word and move on to several more? Are you surprised by the way you were listening? We're going to listen to Massenet's meditation one more time, and this time, in the way Massenet intended for us to listen. We are going to meditate. Make yourself comfortable. You might want to close your eyes. Empty your mind of other thoughts and other distractions, and let your mind wander in response to the music. Send your imagination on a journey. The music might remind you of a particular person in your life, or a particular time or place. If it reminds you of an emotion, allow yourself to feel that emotion. If you closed your eyes, you might want to smack your lips or poke your tongue in your cheek to help you wake up before you open your eyes. Take a deep breath and slowly exhale. We'll hear the Massenet one last time, and while we do, turn your paper over and write down a few of the thoughts you had while we were listening to Massenet's meditation. Even if you had a little daydream, what did you dream about? You might choose to share the thoughts you wrote down with your classmates, or to keep them to yourself. Of course, not all music is intended to make us as thoughtful as Massenet's meditation. But maybe that's the point. Composers know that people listen to music in different ways. And just like with language, composers know how to make us listen. Film composers have long understood that music is a language that can tell stories, spark emotions, and trigger thoughts. The whole purpose of film scores is to add another layer of storytelling to the images on the screen. Austrian composer Erich Wolfgang Korngold's swashbuckling film score for the movie The Seahawk is a great example of how music works as a language. It tells the story of pirates locked in battle at sea. It stirs our emotions when a love story surfaces, and it makes us think about things, like the great bravery to be found in one man who leads his followers to victory. Korngold's music tells a story, stirs emotion, and makes us think. In addition to the basic elements of pitch and rhythm, composers pick specific instruments and instrument combinations to make their music as expressive as possible. This is called musical instrumentation. Listen to this excerpt from Korngold's film score and see if you can identify the instruments used to express the energy of the pirates at sea. The answer is almost every instrument in the orchestra. You heard piccolos, flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, French horns, trumpets, trombones, a tuba, violins, violas, cellos, string basses, and timpani. The woodwind section, the brass section, the string section, and the percussion section. Composers also work with musical dynamics to make their music expressive. Dynamics refers to the use of volume, making the music loud or soft, dramatic or suspenseful. Listen to this excerpt from Korngold's score and pay attention to the music as it gets loud and soft. Another element of music used by composers is called tempo. Tempo refers to the speed or pace at which the music is performed by musicians. Composers instruct whether the music is to be fast or slow, and the tempo can change many times during a work of music. Listen to this excerpt from Korngold's score and pay attention to any changes in the tempo. Film composers believe that an audience member shouldn't notice the film score so much when they go to the movies. The real movie experience, after all, is what happens on the screen. Once you listen to the richness of a film score, though, it's hard to imagine a movie without music. The next time you go to a movie, you might listen to see if the music is telling the story, hitting the emotions, or making you think. Now that you can appreciate the potential in music as a language without words.